Time we got. Okay. Okay. The time is now 5:38 on Wednesday, March 20th, 2024, and this public meeting of the DC State Board of Education will come to order. The roll will now be called to determine the presence of a quorum. Deputy Director, please call the roll.
And a reminder to members, the order is a bit different given our new bylaws. So, Representative Kelly, Representative Villaflor, Representative Washington, Representative Yarkin, Representative Best,
Present.
Representative Chang,
Present.
Representative Goulet, Representative Henderson,
Present.
Representative O'Leary,
Here.
Representative Reed, Representative Williams, Vice President Patterson,
Present.
President Thompson. Mr. Vice President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. All right. A quorum has been determined, and the State Board will now proceed with the business portion of the meeting. Members, we have a draft agenda before us. Are there corrections or additions to this agenda?
I have a note. I ask that we strike SR 24-7 from the agenda.
Okay.
So we had discussed that we would delay that so that committee could consult on that.
Okay. That motion's been moved. Has it been seconded?
Second.
Okay. It's been properly moved. It's been properly moved and seconded. Jen, can you call the roll? This vote. A vote. All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any nays? Any abstentions? So moved, sir. Thank you. I also have a motion. I move that we amend the agenda. Well, we already did the agenda for that part. I do want to move around the agenda a little bit, if that's okay. Also, to move that the agenda consider CR 24-1 honoring the late Ramona Edlin. After Dr. Grant makes her remarks, of course, some of Ms. Ramona Edlin's loved ones will be present this evening. Considering the resolution sooner will ensure they do not have to stay for the duration of this whole process that we have. We know we do resolutions at the end, and I want to be considerate of their time once they arrive here. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Any nays, abstentions? Okay, thank you. The motion has been properly moved and seconded, and we have all the yeas and nays. So, with that being done, we now have the minutes from our March 4th special meeting, our March 6th working session, and our March 9th board retreat in front of us. Is there a motion to adopt these minutes?
So moved.
The second?
Second.
Okay, the motion has been properly moved and seconded. Is there a discussion? Seeing no discussion, the motion is to adopt these minutes. I will ask for the yeas and the nays. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? The motion is approved. All right. Good evening. My name is Jacques Patterson. I am the at-large representative and vice president of the State Board of Education. On behalf of the District of Columbia, the State Board of Education members, I want to welcome our guests and the viewing public to our public meeting. The State Board of Education holds its regular scheduled public meetings on the third Wednesday of every month at the Old Council Chambers here at 441 4th Street Northwest, or as we say, the Marion S. Berry Building. Our meetings is also being broadcast via live on District Knowledge Network. Over the last month, the State Board has met with the Office of the State Superintendent of Education to lay out a path forward for finalizing and approving the district's social and emotional learning standards. We are also looking forward to voting to approve the district's inaugural financial literacy standards this evening. Additionally, We met with Chairman Mendelson to debrief our performance oversight hearing and further discussed our agency budget request. State Board members also participated in our spring retreat on March 9th, where we discussed committee structures, strategic goals, and work plans for the rest of 2024. Tonight, members will vote on new committee structures and appointments following our spring retreat. I would also like to congratulate the person sitting next to me, our State Superintendent, Dr. Christina Grant, on her recent announcement that she will be the new Executive Director of the Center for Education Policy Research at Harvard University. We will miss working with you. We know we have you for a little while, but we do really, really appreciate, we're happy for your opportunity, but we appreciate how these years you have really helped us shine. So I want to say thank you personally and on behalf of this board. This evening, the State Board will hear from 14 public witnesses. We look forward to hearing from you. We encourage the public to sign up every month to share testimony. As a reminder, sign-up closes 48 hours before the public meeting, and the link can be found at www.sboe.dc.gov. The next public meeting of the State Board will be held on the 17th of April. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to our great State Superintendent, Dr. Grant, for her remarks.
Thank you, Vice President Patterson. You have me for a couple more months, but truly, thank you. It's been an outright joy working with this board. We've got a lot accomplished, and it wouldn't be me if we didn't have a set of votes coming this month, next month, and maybe even May, so we can continue our great work together. Thank you again, Vice President Patterson, and all the members of the DC State Board of Education. I'm pleased to sit with you all this evening and give you an update on some of our priorities. First, I do want to acknowledge and again say thank you. The board took a very important vote on March 6th to approve updating the categories in the format of our DC school report card. Truly, for me and all the hard workers at OSSE, thank you. After updating our state accountability plan, we collectively worked together to pursue extensive public engagement and a process to identify what data parents and community members wanted to see on our report card. The updated categories and format will align to what the district residents have said they wanted, incorporating school climate survey data, teacher retention data, student to staff ratios, and more robust course information while maintaining our commitment to transparently report school performance data. So again, truly thank you. Developing these enhancements will take time. Many individuals know our report cards are released in November, and it really will take from now until then to make sure we redesign our report card in an efficient, but more importantly, an effective and transparent way. We'll continue to keep the broader board informed of our efforts and continue to meet with board leadership on our progress. We will keep the public also updated on our progress over time as we build out all of the work that was enshrined in SR 24-5. Now to tonight's panel. My team and I are excited to hear tonight's discussion on social emotional learning standards. OSSE's Division of Teaching and Learning has been working hard to develop the district's first set of SEL standards. We've done a lot of firsts. And we're excited to hear how we can strengthen social emotional instruction throughout the District of Columbia. Beginning in September of 2022, we conducted an SEL landscape analysis, and we began discussions with CASEL, one of the nation's premier organizations focused on social emotional learning standards, the development and implementation. We then conducted further research and analysis. Thereafter, we established a working group to begin drafting the standards and an expert reviewer group to advise on the writing group and providing feedback to our initial draft of standards. Through this engagement, we received feedback from more than 60 teachers, principals, deans, community stakeholders, including organizations such as the Washington Teachers Union, DCPS's Becoming Team, Peace of Mind, School Talk, and many, many charter school leaders. We're truly, truly proud and appreciative of the valuable feedback that these partners have provided us in informing our draft SEL standards. We released our standards for public comment in December. We have already reviewed and updated the draft standards in response to formal public feedback. We look forward to listening closely to the panel discussion tonight, as well as reviewing the state board submitted feedback. We anticipate presenting updated standards that weigh and respond to the holistic feedback we have received from experts, the public, tonight's panel, and the state board at the board's working session. And so together we've done menstrual health, social studies, we'll be presenting social emotional learning, and now I'm thrilled to talk a bit more about financial literacy. Responding to the significant public demand, including this week, I was at Simon Elementary and a student said, hey, like, when are you going to teach us about how to open a bank account? I said, well, I couldn't have paid you for that question, but here we are. We've established an internal financial literacy working group and identified local and national experts to support the district's first set of financial literacy standards. We engage students, educators, and community members to inform the development of those state standards, focusing on developing standards for a standalone high school elective course. After constructive feedback from educators, students, and community members, as well as local and national financial literacy experts, we published draft literacy standards in November. We received robust feedback from the state board and the community, including from 42 DC educators. We've reviewed every single comment and made substantial revisions to the first draft to streamline the standards and to prioritize district priorities. As a result, the final draft of the DC Financial Literacy Standards are before you today and are organized in 5 sections: earned income, saving and investing, spending, credit, and managing risk. Each section includes 2 tables organizing the standards into knowledge standards and skill standards, as well as driving questions to catalyze robust classroom conversations on important financial literacy topics. Mastering these skills can change our students' lives and the lives of their children. With the adoption of these financial literacy standards, we signal our support for greater and more equitable access to high-quality financial education for district high school students. I enthusiastically, I can't even say it, I'm so excited, urge the board to vote to approve SR 24-9. I do also want to note, as Vice President Patterson shared, the board will vote on a ceremonial resolution honoring Dr. Ramona Edlin and a resolution on the appointment of Kimberly Humphrey as the Ombudsman for Public Education. While we do not take a stance on these votes, I do want to note that on a personal note, I know that I stand on the shoulders of giants. I wouldn't be in my seat were it not the sheroes, well-known and unknown, who help advance educational opportunities for people who look like me, sound like me, and lead like me. And so I appreciate and find it of good value that we would lift up the work of great educators as you all are doing this evening. I also want to extend a conditional warm welcome to Ms. Humphrey. I was pleased to have the opportunity to work with the state board's previous Ombudsman for Public Education to establish the DC Special Education Hub. Should your nomination be approved this evening, my team and I look forward to establishing a similarly strong working relationship with you, as it is vital to all aspects of our public education system, and it works best when we work together in service of all of our students, particularly our students with disabilities. Thanks for having me here this evening, and thanks for those remarks. Again, you have me until June, but thank you for acknowledging the great work we've gotten done together, and I look forward to your great vote on financial literacy this evening. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us tonight, Dr. Grant. We appreciate OSSE's continued partnership on so many policy issues of importance to our students and our schools and our families. Thank you so much. Based on our approved amended agenda, we will now move to vote on ceremonial resolution CR 24-1, honoring the late Ramona Edlin. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It has been moved by Representative O'Leary. Is there a second?
Second.
It has been seconded by Representative Best. Okay. The motion is properly moved and seconded. Is there discussion on the resolution? All right, Representative O'Leary.
I would just like to personally thank Dr. Edlin for everything that she did for us in this city. I have known her for over 30 years, and as Dr. Grant mentioned, she really was a shero for everyone in this city, and we'll miss her deeply.
Other discussion? Then I'll take the opportunity to speak. I'm the one that tried to introduce this, so I'm glad that we are at this point where we're doing this resolution. Dr. Edlin literally is just a giant for those who do not know her. I came here as a single father to the District of Columbia, trying to navigate the school systems, and I got involved in schools and everything like that, and one of my first mentors was Dr. Edlin. And she guided me through all the nuances, which is a complicated thing, of DC education, and really was that friend that you could call at any given time to get instructions on how to navigate things, but also to be that good friend when you were a little frustrated with things, how they were going, to get recharged when the battle gets tough sometimes, as you try to do the right thing in a system that doesn't always reward the right thing. She's, you know, that John Lewis get into good trouble type of person for DC schools. And I mean all schools. You know, later in her career, she, you know, was a strong proponent of choice, of course, but she started out with DCPS. And so she did not have, you know, a side. She was on the side of right. And that's important when families need someone who is just looking at what they have to navigate to get their child a quality education. Not trying to get into the politics, but just trying to really do what's right to improve the system. So I'm just very thankful I had the opportunity to be mentored by her, to be able to introduce this resolution on her behalf. She will be missed by so many who called on her, you know, just to get a kind word or to get some instruction or to get some history of how this system works. And so with that, I'll say I'm so thankful that we are doing this evening. With that being said, is there any other discussions? Seeing no further discussions, the motion to adopt CR 2024-1 is now to be done. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it, so it carries. I do want to take a point of privilege if I can. I know we have loved ones here who are here. I don't know if you guys wanted to come up and take a picture. Do we have the resolution or anything, or do we want to read it? Okay.
We do. We
Okay.
have a copy for them.
Okay, we have a copy for them. If I can, I'm going to try to, if I can, Jen, Deputy Director, take a point of privilege to just stop for just a second to bring them up, to take a picture with them real quick for all those who knew her and with the group. So if we could just take a 5-minute break and to take a picture with those who are representing the late Dr. Ramona Edlin. Thank you. Now we'll reconvene, and I'm going to ask our Deputy Director. We did not read it into, we would like the public to understand exactly what this resolution says, so our Deputy Director will be reading it into record.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you, members, for your patience as I was making sure that we have copies of those photos. State Board of Education Ceremonial Resolution honoring the late Ramona Edelin, CR 24-1. Whereas Dr. Ramona Hogue Edelin founded the Department of African American Studies at Northeastern University in 1972 and served as its chair for several years. Whereas in 1997, Dr. Edelin joined and later led the National Urban Coalition, where she led the creation of the Say Yes to a Youngster's Future program, which provided math, science, and technology assistance to youth and teachers of color in urban settings at over 200 schools. Whereas in 1991, Dr. Edelin joined the board of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation and was appointed to the Presidential Board on Historically Black Colleges and Universities in 1998 by President Bill Clinton. Whereas Dr. Edelin is credited with coining the term African American during her tenure at Northeastern University, which aimed to acknowledge and celebrate the Pan-African experience, the term later being popularized by Reverend Jesse Jackson and remaining commonly used today. Whereas Dr. Edelin served as the chair of the University of the District of Columbia's Board of Trustees Academic Affairs Committee, the DC Community Humanities Council, and the Committee on Education and Prevention's Commission on Drug Control Policy, and served on the District of Columbia Education Goals 2000 State Panel. And whereas Dr. Edelin most recently served as the Executive Director of the DC Association of Chartered Public Schools. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education honors Dr. Ramona Edelin's lifelong dedication to public education advocacy, civil rights activism, and leadership.
Thank you, ma'am. I want to pass this back along. If I could have someone from the staff come and pick it up and take it back to the family. Thank you. We will now move on to our expert panel. Tonight's panelists will inform the State Board about best practices in social emotional learning, what to look for when evaluating the draft standards, and what leaders in the district should consider during implementation. We are excited to hear from Madeline Aberso-Burke, and as I call your name, if you could come to the table. Emily Massa, I don't want to say your name incorrectly. Casamides? Okay, thank you. Jessica Hildebiddle, thank you so much. And Angelina Zara, thank you. Each of you will have up to 5 minutes, and then we will move to one round of questions from the State Board. We'll begin with Ms. Aberso-Burke, and please start when you are ready.
Good evening, esteemed members of the board and fellow panelists. My name is Madeline. I'm 16 years old, and I'm a junior at Jackson Reed High School. Thank you for the opportunity to share my own experience as well as that of my
Excuse me,
friends.
will you please check that the mic is on, please? Sorry to interrupt.
There you go, right into the mic.
Okay. Oh,
Perfect. Thank you.
should I start over? Okay. Good evening, esteemed members of the board and fellow panelists. My name is Madeline. I'm 16 years old, and I'm a junior at Jackson Reed High School. Thank you for the opportunity to share my own experience as well as that of my friends and peers. While it was intimidating at first, Jackson Reed's size grew to be one of the things I cherished most about the school. After nearly 3 years there, I still find myself constantly face to face with new people, new stories, new cultures. The novelty of such boundless diversity and exploration within the walls of my school came with its own challenges, though. The education landscape in DC is filled with a number of large schools like my own. As a result of their size, more often than not, students feel their needs are not effectively met within the school building. This feeling is only further amplified when it comes to the social and emotional well-being of students. Schools with such large student bodies can too easily overlook the needs of the many for the satisfaction of the few and push back on things like missing work, low test scores, or problematic attendance without acknowledging or investigating the roots of these problems. The goal of our city is to create school environments where students feel safe, seen, and loved, but poor mental health withholds students from reaching their full potential and restricts their overall performance in school, while also taking an incredible mental and physical toll on them. Students cannot be expected to flourish in these environments if they do nothing but drain them. Learning isn't always easy, and learning environments should be structured as complex ecosystems in which students are pushed consistently to their highest potential, both academically and emotionally. To students, it feels this concept is lost too often amongst adults, when we lose our ability to foster environments in which students can thrive by considering students as people rather than test scores or grades. We're sabotaging ourselves, our schools, our children, and our future. I'm glad the city is recognizing the need for a better emphasis on social emotional learning in schools, both in what students are taught and the training and aid that is given to teachers. When we don't teach students and young people to understand something as intricate as their emotions, we teach them to fear it. An unwillingness to investigate the complexity of the human mind and the immense power it holds over us is what encourages young people to shove their emotions down and away. It is what allows them to refuse to acknowledge and come to terms with the way they are feeling at any given moment. And because of this, it is in many ways responsible for the crippling mental health crisis of our students that we have found ourselves facing now. It is the responsibility of schools to engage in sufficient in-depth SEL, and while it's important to the merit of SEL that we allow for schools and teachers to enact their own interpretations of certain standards, we cannot allow ourselves to reach a point where the subjectivity of social emotional learning as a topic is, for lack of a better word, exploited to not reach students' needs. Strong SEL programs in schools show students that it is okay to feel positive or negative emotions. General awareness and understanding of the mind is immensely important for students' ability to move mindfully through the world and act empathetically and kindly. It's impossible to hold students to the standard of excellence we currently expect of them when their environments have all the rigor and none of the understanding and support they require to succeed. With a deeper understanding of this problem, there can be a more widespread understanding of what is needed, and we as students can again believe in the abilities of schools to tailor their SEL programs and expectations to their environments and student bodies. We have the resources and the capacity to transform our schools to better support the mental health and wellness of students, but we must focus on social emotional learning just as much, if not more, than we focus on student academic success. It is our job to make sure that students spend their time in environments that are dedicated to their success along with their overall well-being. By doing this, we can ensure that the outcome students feel is valued, cared for, and ready to be successful with the tools they have learned. Thank you for this opportunity to testify, and I look forward to any questions you may have.
Is this mic also on? Okay. So, good evening, members of the State Board. My name is Emily Casamedus, and I am Senior Counsel for Ward 4 Council Member Janice Lewis-George. Thank you for inviting our office to testify tonight about incorporating conflict resolution into your proposed SEL standards. Councilmember Lewis-George introduced Bill 25-0420, the Conflict Resolution Amendment Act of 2023, along with 6 of her colleagues last year. Councilmembers Allen, Henderson, Tran-White, Nadeau, Robert White, and Pinto. Integrating conflict resolution into public education will create safer and more engaging learning environments, foster positive relationship-based approaches to school discipline, and promote healthy responses to the conflicts that arise in and out of school. Simply put, a system-wide conflict resolution curriculum will make our schools and communities safer while also helping our students thrive now and in the future. Our office received an overwhelmingly positive response to the legislation, proving that this approach resonates with educators, with parents, and with students. Conflict resolution education is already making a positive impact in the schools that have dedicated programs, and DC is really lucky to have incredible organizations doing this work, like Teach Peace of Mind, the Alliance of Concerned Men, and Newbie Fitness. The Conflict Resolution Amendment Act would ensure that all DC students are engaged in this empowering conflict resolution curriculum. The bill has three main components. So first, it would require OSSE to publish a model conflict resolution curriculum that aligns with the relevant health education standards. Second, the bill would require that the model curriculum include alternative options to teach age-appropriate conflict resolution skills for each grade level. And then third, it requires the LEAs to certify that they have adopted a model curriculum or an alternative program by 2025. In January, Chairman Mendelson held a public hearing on the bill, and we heard from educators, students, and parents about how certain conflict resolution courses have already been impactful for them. We also heard about ways to improve our bill. We have a couple takeaways from that hearing that I wanted to share with you. First, people are really excited to expand current conflict resolution programming to all students and all schools throughout DC. This is a resource that should be available for everyone, and we're glad to be in the position that we don't have to reinvent the wheel to make that happen. Second, students need this curriculum now. One student testified that she had learned to change the channel in her brain to calm herself in her peace class. Another student said that they learned how to be kind and thoughtful. Another testified that conflict resolution lessons helped students and teachers relate to one another better. These are all so important for making sure that everyone feels safe in and out of the school every day and can focus on academic standards. Third, we heard that creating a conflict resolution curriculum through the health education standards wasn't the best option for ensuring that it receives the prioritization it deserves. So we're very excited that the state board is promulgating the SEL standards and agree that conflict resolution curricula should adhere to those standards instead. And finally, our educators and students asked for clarity on how conflict resolution will be taught. Our educators are already tasked with so much, so we really need to dig deep and determine how to best replicate successful programs across DC. We believe that working with the state board and OSSE, we can address all of these stated needs. And I'd also like to share a few personal reflections about the impact and importance of conflict resolution instruction. In a former career, I served as a lead teacher in a pre-K 3 and 4 classroom, Head Start classroom. And we taught literacy, numeracy, we taught fine and gross motor skills, but in my opinion, truly the most important thing that we did was introduce the children to conflict resolution. We used the Peace Path model in my classroom, and it made an incredible difference to the 3 and 4-year-olds' ability to self-regulate their emotions, to recognize when they were feeling hurt or had harmed another person, to actively resolve conflicts themselves, and to build healthy, positive relationships with their peers, their teachers, their family, and others in their community. I felt so much pride every single time students made their way over to the Peace Path instead of asking a teacher to intervene and address the conflict for them. Pre-K is not too early for kids to learn to use I statements, to explain their emotions and to empathize with the feelings of others. It's not too early to figure out how to make things right. My students loved the autonomy of the Peace Path rather than asking a teacher to intervene, and our classroom was a nicer and calmer place because of it. I also have a criminal justice policy background and can tell you that conflict resolution skills prevent violence and other forms of harm. I've worked on plenty of reactionary legislation, from sentencing to prisons to expungement, all meant to respond to violence and harm after the fact. And we rarely have the foresight and commitment to invest in deep prevention and intervention programming. This bill is so important because it gives our children the tools that they need to manage their emotions and resolve their problems peacefully. If we start in our schools, we can instill lifelong skills that help students overcome conflicts, build positive and lasting relationships, and make our communities safer. That is what prevention looks like. Councilmember Lewis George and her office look forward to working in partnership to ensure that the SEL standards incorporate clear, appropriate conflict resolution competencies for all students and reflect the needs of our students, educators, families, and DC as a whole. Thank you.
Good evening. Is that working? Good evening, members of the State Board of Education. My name is Jessica Hiltspittle, and I'm the Director of Culture, Equity, and Access at the Inspired Teaching Demonstration School. I want to begin my time with you by telling you a story about one of our 8th grade graduates, Peter Carter, name change for privacy. Peter enrolled with us at ITDS as a 7th grade student during the 2021 virtual school year. Before his time with us, his school experience included multiple suspensions for fighting, truancy and attendance issues that resulted in CFSA calls, and being told by school staff that he was, quote, worthless. As a 7th grade student with an IEP, he could barely read, and his embarrassment caused him to rebel against anything school-related. It's also relevant to note that Peter's challenges extended beyond his school experience. Growing up as the oldest of 5 in a single-parent home, Peter's life was impacted by systemic oppressions such as a lack of access and opportunity. This resulted in traumatic exposure to violence, drugs, and alcohol. For years, Peter internalized the negative narratives of his teachers and shouldered the burden of societal inequities, deeming himself unworthy and incapable. He became withdrawn and despondent. At ITDS, we know that to support our students, we have to address all of these issues through a whole child approach. For Peter, this began with understanding his needs, knowing that before we could address his academic challenges, we had to first address his physiological and his psychological needs. Peter needed to know that teachers cared for him, loved him, and that he belonged. He was quickly added to a social worker's caseload, and together they built Peter's self-regulation, self-esteem, and advocacy skills. Teachers dedicated class time to Tier 1 social-emotional learning, including responsive classroom advisory, community meetings, and restorative justice practices. Support staff forged relationships with Peter's family. Not having access to social-emotional learning before attending ITDS, Peter expressed confusion, followed by understanding that he wasn't worthless or incapable. He simply needed support in developing his social-emotional skills in the same way he received support to improve his academic or athletic skills, and develop he did. Peter became a student leader at ITDS. He shared his story with peers and led groups for younger students who experienced similar challenges. With his social-emotional needs being met, Peter was able to focus on his academics, improving 5 grade levels in reading in less than 2 years. By the time he ended his experience with us in 8th grade, Peter was accepted into one of DC's selective college prep high schools and was elected by his peers as the school staff as a graduation speaker. I'm sure my fellow teachers, school leaders, and panelists know success stories like Peter's all too well. Our personal experiences and the empirical research tells us unequivocally that commitment to and investment in social, emotional, and behavioral standards and learning leads to positive impacts on a child's school experiences. These positive impacts include the mitigation of effects of anxiety and depression, decreases in bullying, social isolation, and other maladaptive behaviors, and ultimately increases in school performance, including academic growth and achievement. Despite these positives, we also know that the first part of Peter's story isn't an exception. Barriers at multiple levels can prevent students from accessing the full benefits of social-emotional development. The micro-level, individual school levels, include gaps in knowledge for teachers, lack of access to social-emotional learning resources, and staffing shortages. Barriers at the meso or district level include competing district priorities, dependence on punitive measures including zero-tolerance policies, and educator stress and burnout caused by an over-reliance on teachers and schools to address systemic inequities. And finally, barriers at the societal level, which include a lack of investment by decision makers and government officials, failure to provide sustainable funding, and individualistic and meritocratic norms that fail to recognize the effect of systemic oppressions. The adoption of social-emotional learning standards alone is not enough to overcome the challenges posed by these barriers, but it's an important start. And in reviewing the standards proposed by OSSI, I want to highlight 3 key areas of strength. First, the standards are aligned with CASEL competencies, an evidence-based framework that fosters development in multiple areas. Second, the standards have a specific equity-focused lens. Research concludes that current social-emotional learning standards largely reflect white, middle-class American beliefs and values, resulting in the continued disenfranchisement of minoritized student populations. Within the DC standards, we do see evidence that the standards reflect a diverse community perspective through the inclusion of cultural awareness competencies that require students to, 1, recognize how their beliefs are shaped by social and cultural experiences, and 2, to engage in social critique that can lead to change. Finally, the proposed standards include competency indicators that span multiple grades. In alignment with developmentally appropriate practices, these standards provide an opportunity for students across all ages. To conclude, I ask that your support for social-emotional learning expand beyond just a vote in favor of adoption of these standards. Your vote should also come with commitments. They include dedicated funding for equity-based social-emotional curricula, intentional professional development for all DC educators, and increases in district and state-level partnerships to support placement of mental and behavioral health professionals in schools. Thank you for your time and consideration. I look forward to answering your questions.
Good evening, esteemed members of the board, fellow panelists, and colleagues. Thank you for inviting me to share my testimony at this pressing time in education. My name is Angelina Zara, and I'm a trauma-informed expert, national presenter, and social and emotional learning specialist and coach. I currently work at Capital City Public Charter School, a Title I full inclusion school in Ward 4, where I work daily to coach and support teachers and students from pre-K through 4th grade. My focus is on adult and child well-being, educational neuroscience, and social and emotional learning strategies and practices for staff and students. I'm here this evening to discuss best practices, share critical reflection questions I encourage state board members, as well as my fellow education leaders in this field to ask, and share what I believe we must consider when implementing these standards well across the city. I want to start by sharing my appreciation for OSSE's collaboration and initiative in the establishment of social and emotional learning standards. This fall, I was invited as a collaborator for OSSE's SEL Standards Development Project. Working within this team allowed me to have authentic conversations with other leaders across the district and co-construct equity-driven key indicators for grades 3 through 5. During the strategic collaboration, I was able to engage in timely dialogue with other leaders and identify citywide trends and areas for growth. Engaging in discussions with fellow practitioners in the field has solidified my belief that when we are discussing the implementation and embodiment of practices, we must first start with adult well-being, regulation, and skills. Best practices in social and emotional learning begin with staff. The integration of social and emotional learning should be embedded within institutional policies and procedures for staff members who can in turn support students in the mastery of these skills throughout their school careers. We must also be intentional and reflective about the lens in which we view the acquisition and mastery of these skills, keeping inclusion and equity at the forefront of our thinking. Well-executed social and emotional learning prioritizes relational safety, actively creates and sustains a positive working and learning climate, and cultivates a growth mindset among staff, students, and families. When adults and students feel safe enough to access the learning parts of their brains, time in the classroom is maximized, and social, emotional, and cognitive skill development follows. There are some key questions I believe we need to ask within the current system when it comes to supporting and sustaining these skills for all educational stakeholders. Among these include, what are the embodied SEL skills of organizational leaders and staff members? What are the lagging skills? Are there systems and structures in place to coach into or support these lagging skills to support growth? What impact does school climate have on the nervous system of our staff and students? What skills are being consistently modeled among staff and students? And who is consistently not meeting standards? What are the systemic barriers that require interrogation to reduce the predictability of who fails and who meets these standards? In order to ensure that the new DC social and emotional learning standards are implemented well in our school buildings, we must enact progress monitoring measures for staff and students, provide consistent professional development for all stakeholders who work with students, and prioritize the implementation and information sharing of these standards. At a time where burnout and turnover are at a national high, we must ensure that educators know that this is not another thing added to the plate, but rather this is the plate in post-pandemic education. We have an opportunity to set a precedent that shares a consistent message and implementation plan throughout DC, and I'm hopeful that we use it. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you all. Deputy Director, will you now call the round of member questions? Each member will have 3 minutes. A reminder to members that the 3 minutes include both the time to ask the questions and the panelists to respond.
Yes, we will start with our student representative, Representative Yarkin.
Hi, thank you all for your testimony tonight. This question can be posed to any of you. What do you think is the best way to reach kids with these standards now that we have the standards established?
I think in order for messaging to go to students, we have to have consistent messaging and professional development for teachers.
I would add, there's an element of what we give time and attention to is what we care about. And so the way that we message this to students is by building it into their day, not making it separate or extra or a new block or a new period, making sure that it's integrated throughout and that it becomes a consistent conversation, not an isolated block, but integrated into all components of the day.
Representative Best.
All right, thank you. I think I'm about to preach to the choir when I say that SEL is so important, and I just think that we're doing it wrong, right? And what I mean by that is if the purpose of school is to prepare students to gain like knowledge, prepare them to lead productive and fulfilling lives. I feel like SEL is the non-ABC part of school that we need to really focus, and it needs to be a more considerable chunk because it's extremely undervalued. So like if I think about SEL, it's like equipping students with the skills they need to survive in the real world, like basic relationships, building relationships, making responsible decisions, resolving conflict, things of that nature. And if we think about the pitfalls of like where of how people are often held back, it's because they don't build those relationships. They make irresponsible decisions, and they have trouble resolving conflict. And I know that we're thinking about the standards, but I think right now for me, like what would help me out is I'm more interested in implementation, right? And so my question is, how can we start to think about how we structure school to ensure that SEL is implemented with fidelity, and it's not just something that's sprinkled on every once in a while? And that's to anyone.
I agree with what was said, that it's important that SEL be kind of moved to like be a part of the curriculum naturally, so a part of a bunch of different things. But I also think it could be important to have specific portions of the day cut out for it so we can really focus on the importance of it. And especially if it's during school time and things like that, like if there's an SEL period where, I don't know, different things are happening during that like specific cutout time of the day, that could give time for students to prepare and be aware that this is what's happening at that time, and that's just going to happen, and they don't have to actively seek out the help they might need or something.
You reminded me of a book I read called Troublemakers, which looks at students who are seen as, they're the story of Peter that I shared with you, right? Individuals who are put into the margins, and really recognizing them as the warning signs that the system is failing. And so it really is redefining it, and starting from the ground up in some senses, because you can't actually build a plane while it's flying. It falls apart. You have to build it on the ground and then test it. One concrete recommendation I would say is really challenging us to honor ourselves, to honor the stories of individuals. And by individuals and stakeholders, I don't just mean students. I certainly mean students, but I do also mean the educators. I think that came up in all of our testimony. We need to start with things like empathy interviews, and really hear from them about what do they need and what should this look like.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Chang.
Ms. Zara, I appreciate how you said that social emotional learning is not another thing to be added to the plate, but it is the plate. Where do you notice the most friction right now in your day-to-day work as an SEL coach?
If I'm speaking honestly, I think that teacher well-being is not in a good place right now, and I notice a high rate of burnout. I also think about, again, the way the system has been built and what we prioritize in the system, and how leadership might embody or not embody the social and emotional skills that we expect teachers to embody and then teach to students. So I think it starts at the top, and I think it requires a constant interrogation of not only what the policies look like, but how they're being implemented on the ground level.
How does that play out in your day-to-day?
In the day-to-day, it
work?
can look like challenging relationships among colleagues. It can look like avoidance of conflict resolution instead of direct engagement and overcoming it. It can look like increased call-outs or teacher retention issues where we do not have teachers coming to work on a regular basis because they're either too tired or too burnt out to come to work. Yeah, it just looks like general mental health deterioration among staff. And then regardless of if our discipline policies are able to be more restorative and more focused in the classroom, if we do not have resilient and empowered teachers teaching those students while they're in the classrooms, then everything else suffers. I hope, did that answer your question more clearly?
I think I'm looking for a little bit more color in the 60 seconds I have left of what that looks like in the classroom, right? Of what are some of the things as we're implementing this that we need to be thoughtful about at the very tactical level in addition to these broader themes?
Yeah, I think in the classroom, it really looks like, and this was mentioned before, just a really clear increase in proactive tier 1 strategies. So specifically, that can look like teacher language, thinking about reinforcing and narrating the skills that you would like to see when students are showing mastery of these skills. I think it can also show up in discipline referrals and thinking about who, like I said, who is not meeting the standards and what does the implicit bias look like in terms of teacher language, teacher redirection, teacher discipline outcomes. So those are more concrete strategies.
And if I may quickly add, if you're talking about how we integrate this into the whole rather than having it added on as a separate piece, I actually think pre-K is a really good place to look. That's the place where I won't say they do it perfectly, but it's the place where we do it best right now.
Representative Goulet.
I want to thank you all for your testimony tonight. It was really powerful. Let me make sure I've got the name right. Is it Miss Abersol Burke? Okay, well, just want to thank you for coming in and speaking about your experience at Jackson Reed. What do you think we can do to help students? Are there specific things, you mentioned some ideas in the testimony that would be helpful. Are there specific courses or just changes in either administration or policy that you think would improve the quality of SEL for students at the school?
I mean, I agree with what everybody else is saying, that it's really important that we help teachers help students because they're the ones, I guess, most that interact with students the most. But I just think most importantly, like, I'm not sure how to say it, but I guess just that we make sure that we're clear with our intentions, I guess. I'm not sure I have any specific recommendations, but I just think that it's really important to be we understand what we're trying to gain from this, and we make sure that we're focusing on the right things. I think at Jackson Reed specifically, a lot of the time there's just a lot of fairly harsh pushback on things and just in my opinion, over the top disciplinary responses to things like fights and absences and tardies. And obviously those aren't good things, but I think it does more harm than good to just excessively punish these students instead of seeing why they might feel that they're too tired to come into school and get out of their bed and stuff like that. I'm not sure if this is what you're looking for, but at my middle school, we had teams and teachers would confer with one another about the work that they were giving out to their students and about their lesson plans. And that's not exactly SEL, but I think that is another important thing where teachers can work with each other to have support systems and to understand the extent of the work they're giving to students.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. It's good to hear an example of where it's done well and then places we need to improve at Jackson Reed. So thank you so much for coming in tonight. Just very quickly, Miss Tatro Casamitas, am I pronouncing that correct?
Cosmatis, yes.
Casamitas. What beyond what we're approving in our SEL is going to be included in the bill, and are those things we're looking to fund in this year's budget, given kind of some of the fiscal constraints? So is there programming beyond what we're doing tonight?
So the bill was introduced before my time at the council office, and before I believe these SEL standards were published. So we are open to changing the bill to make sure that we are doing what needs to be done to support these standards. So if that means funding curriculum and teacher professional development and all of those things, we're really open to working with you all to make sure that, you know, the council and the state board are working hand in hand to really make this work for schools.
Thank you all. Appreciate your time tonight, and apologies my time ran out, but thank you very much.
Representative Henderson.
Hi, thank you all. Ms. Casamitas, thank you for being here, and thanks to Councilmember Louis George for pushing on this issue. I think that has made a difference in moving these standards forward. The bill calls for a model curriculum. In some other areas like literacy, we've asked OSSI to have like a list of approved curricula. I just wonder, is that one of the things that you would be open to as an alternative to producing a model curriculum, to just identifying things that are working well and that kind of fit within the parameters that you're looking at?
Yep, definitely. You know, we know that there are many programs that do bits and pieces of this at different schools. I think our concern, one, is that teachers don't have to come up with this stuff on their own, and two, that it really is tailored to the culture we have in DC schools. It makes a difference whether this is, you know, something that everyone is talking about using the same language, and you know, it fits into the communities that our kids and our educators are coming from, and we want to make sure that it's something that's tailored to them.
Thank you. Ms. Hiltebittel, you mentioned strengths of the standards. I appreciate that. Are there any things, as you reviewed, that you think should be changed, should be done differently?
I think that because of the unique, you know, system that we have here, where pre-K is universal, that the standards need to expand into the early childhood grades. I second what you said in terms of where are we doing it most successfully, and that is because, for whatever reason, folks understand that 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds are still developing, and then all of a sudden they become 5, and we're like, oh, just kidding, you're done. We just got to focus on your academics now. So it would be that. And then the other thing I would mention is really paying attention to the use of the verbs and the expectations for the students, making sure that we're not selling short the capabilities of students. It is possible for very young children to have conversations about differences, to have conversations about their the big feelings or big emotions. We might use different language and different words, but really looking at making sure that we're not just sticking with things like identifying in a third grader, right? The third grader should be able to identify and apply strategies as well. So really looking to push on some of the practical application of the content and the standards and the indicators within said standards.
All right, thank you. That's helpful. And Ms. Zara, thank you for keeping us oriented towards both that this needs to be foundational, like it needs to go throughout, it needs to be the plate, and also that it won't work if we're not supporting our teachers. So thank you for that.
Representative O'Leary.
I took a lot of notes because this is a chance for the system to realize the importance of student growth in their lives rather than just being data on test scores. All right, I've got a couple of caveats. If this is used by the systems correctly, then the teachers have to be involved in their social and emotional growth also. And they have to the systems have to understand that they have to get away from test preparation and get into students' lives, and their students should be able to relax in the classroom rather than just sit there and be students. They're people in the classrooms. And I mean, I just want to quote something that Ms. Zara said, not the whole thing. We must also be intentional and reflective about the lens, all right? The lens, how we look at students. What are we doing to make our students whole beings by the time they finish? Because they have lives that, when you were talking about Peter, I think his name was, Peter Carter, a pseudonym, all right? Peter lives in every classroom. And Peter, in order to become the success that he became, needed the whole school to work with Peter. And we have thousands and thousands of students that are like he is. And we need to make sure that these standards are utilized effectively. I'll shut up. Anybody have anything to, I mean, you all are nodding your heads, and I know that you're teachers and students and you know what I'm talking about, but
I think I would like to remind everyone that these are skills that can be taught just like any other skill. People aren't born knowing how to regulate their emotions. They aren't born knowing how to resolve conflict. You know, some people's families and communities do a better job of either modeling or explicitly teaching that for them than others. But these are things that we're letting kids grow up without. And it's really important to teach it explicitly, and it makes all the difference in the world.
thank you.
Representative Williams.
Thank you all for your testimony. Ms. Casamidas, I'll start with you just because you had mentioned skills, and that's kind of where I was thinking, similar to Representative Best talking about implementation. So I guess the question becomes, like, in the middle school and high school levels in particular, I'm a 12th grade teacher, where do these skills get taught? Like, when? You know? Does the bill look at, like, implementation in any detailed way?
So the bill allows OSSI to put together the curriculum. I think, like I said, now that the SEL standards are here, I think we can change some of that. If we are looking at starting kids from pre-K, then you don't have to be explicitly teaching them how to use nice words and I statements in 12th grade. They have gotten that. They're used to it. They know all of that, right? And so it can be suffused into the classroom environment, into the, the family, the school support teams. It could be infused into whatever behavioral coaching and outreach there is. If we start early, you need less and less real instruction time as things go, and it becomes really more a part of how you're talking about, how you're dealing with one another in the culture and in the environment, and how you're discussing the material that you're learning.
No, I'm fully on board with that. I guess I didn't phrase my question as I wanted to. So, like, in terms of the buy-in with, like, DCPS, or even when we think about our charter sector, we have, like, so many different charter LEAs, right? Is there a thoughtful approach as, one, I guess, has DCPS committed to this? Because we can legislate something and they can not implement it, right? Which happens often. And then how are we going to make sure that charter schools don't also feel like they're on an island, and that we're doing this thoughtfully citywide? So I'm just curious if there's been any, like, conversation or around that.
Well, many people testified at the hearing, including charter schools and DCPS, and they all were supportive of the big idea here. I think that coordination will take all of us really to make sure that this is treated as the most important thing at school in many ways. One thing we were talking about here that, the teachers need this too. I've done many things since I was in a pre-K classroom, and teaching 3 and 4-year-olds is the hardest thing I have ever done. And there were too many times that I lost my temper with them, that I, was leaving school in tears, that I was exhausted and didn't know if I could show up the next day. And really grounding our classroom in the conflict resolution and in being able to talk about feelings and support kids where they are. It changed everything in my classroom.
Yeah. I'm going to have to cut you off there because you're over time, but I'll just say thank you all. I did have questions for all of you, but did not get to them, so I apologize. But thank you all for your testimony today.
Vice President Patterson.
Thank you. I want to appreciate you guys for coming. I agree with you. I think this is the most important thing that we can talk about. And the reason I feel that way is because I work in a school system. I work for LEA. And coming out of the pandemic was just tough. It was tough on professional level. Third day, when we returned back to school, the first full school year, third day of school, we had a child killed in front of the school that I work at, the LEA I work at. The first day they had a few words. Second day, some shoving. Third day, one picked up a knife and stabbed the other one. He had hid it outside, and he stabbed the other one. To get a call as an administrator to have to respond that you have a child on the sidewalk is devastating. What's even more so sometimes is as difficult, because a death that's just ultimate, is when your own child, when they come back from the pandemic and they started in elementary school, but now they're in middle school because 18 months have passed and everything has changed. And your child does not know how to make that transition, nor do the students that was during the pandemic know how to make that transition. And schools are all over the place, not due to the people wanting to make sure that, but because we focus so much on opening schools and how buildings, what was the ventilation of buildings and things, we gave little thought to how our children were going to return back to school. And my son personally went through a mental breakdown because of how he came back to school and what he had to deal with. So I see this as the most urgent thing coming out of the pandemic. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming here and testifying. I look forward to working with you, especially your office, on this legislation to getting it right. And I also want to say I got to walk in this building and I got to meet you and your dad. And I'm always so happy when I get to see families show up and they get to see their child, their student, their scholar testify in front of us. So with my last few seconds, I just want to say thank you for coming here and being that student that's advocating. I see your work, I see your resume, and thank you for advocating for students. So thank you. I yield back my time.
And that concludes our round of member questions. So thank you.
Thank you again to all of our panelists. I'm going to excuse you at this particular time. Your thoughts and suggestions will help guide the board as we collaborate on the next steps, specifically with Louis George's office and with leaders of the district. The State Board will now recess for about 5 minutes. When we return, we will welcome our public witnesses, which I see starting to populate this chamber. So we look forward to hearing from our public witnesses in about 5 minutes.
course. Dr. Scott, you too. You going, Frank? Ready? Uno, dos, tres. All right.
We hear testimonies from public witnesses at every public meeting, and your comments become part of our official record. If you would like to speak at a future public meeting, please sign up on our website at, and I apologize, sboe.dc.gov, or contact our staff by email at sboe@dc.gov or by phone at 202-741-0888. Tonight we have 14 witnesses who submitted public testimony. We will hear from those in attendance in a panel format, and you will be broken into groups. Each witness will have up to 3 minutes to provide comments. Please note that you must use one of the microphones at the table, which are already on. The timer light on the table will be green for the first 2.5 minutes, yellow for the last 30 seconds, and red after 3 minutes have elapsed. After our public witnesses speak, we will pause for questions from board members. Members will have 3 minutes for questions from our public witnesses. Those 3 minutes include their question, comment, and answer. The Deputy Director will call the public witnesses and announce the question rounds. She will also assist with timing to ensure our witnesses and board members stay within their allotted time. Deputy Director, you may ask public witnesses to come to the table now.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Brady Woodhouse. Naomi Nasser. Carlotta Rother. Lucy Cosgrove. Laura Fuchs. We do it in the order that folks signed up. So, Ms. Fuchs, would you like to come up? Thank you. Please pull up a chair. Thank you. And Brady Woodhouse, you may begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Hi all. My name is Brady Woodhouse, and I'm a type 1 diabetic student at School Without Walls, and I'm the founder and president of the Health Justice Club. One of the first things I asked about in my interview for Walls were the accommodations that were provided for students with chronic illnesses like me. I noticed that the interviewer was flustered, and though I thought it was because he didn't know any students with chronic illnesses, I know now that it's because he was afraid to explain to me the real state of nursing in DCPS schools. I'm here to advocate against the utilization of the cluster model that DCPS has adopted as a result of DC's nursing shortage. For most DCPS schools, a region of 4 schools has to split the time of 1 RN and 1 LPN and 2 unlicensed medical technicians. As a result of this system, I, as a type 1 diabetic, have a subpar support system when it comes to my low or high blood sugar levels. Medical technicians cannot administer insulin or glucagon, which are important medications for type 1 diabetes, without the supervision of an RN. If you don't know what a type 1 diabetic low blood sugar is like, I'd first consider you lucky, but then I'd add that it can become hard to maintain consciousness, and even in less extreme circumstances, it is impossible to fully focus on the content at hand. Walls is lucky to have its own part-time nurse, but I, as a type 1 diabetic, have type 1 diabetes more than 3 days a week. When I was fed up with having my medical resources in a closed nurse's office because she isn't full-time, I decided to start the Health Justice Club. I learned I was one of many DCPS students who are negatively impacted by the nursing system that DCPS uses. Health Justice Club members collaborated in research initiatives via voluntary surveys throughout our building, the results of which we will share and analyze during Naomi's testimony. Additionally, HJC provided a space for students to voice their personal concerns about the cluster model, and I have selected a few of the strongest stories to testify to the importance of expanding the number of RNs in schools, including Carlotta, Lucy, and Evie. Finally, I directed HJC to become a space to discuss solutions and actions that are supported with research, which will be discussed during NAIA's ceremony. Although we acknowledge the limited scope of the State Board of Education, we hope to convince you that addressing the nursing shortage in DC and DC schools is both within the ability and the responsibility of DCPS. We then hope to identify pathways with you in order to implement our changes or other changes that will help to address the nursing shortage in DC and DC schools. Thank you for your time, and I hope to work with you all in the future.
Hi all, my My name is Naomi Nasser, and I am a student at School Without Walls and Chief of Research for the Health Justice Club. A good portion of the pushback that Health Justice Club experiences sources from speculations that students, at least high school students, do not need a full-time nurse. It is important to note that at Walls, this could not be further from the truth. Health Justice Club sent out a voluntary but insightful survey to School Without Walls students via flyers and announcements. The survey was anonymous and restricted to students with DCPS student affiliated email. The short survey got to the point, asking students about their satisfaction and experience with the nursing staff of the school. Additionally, when polling results, we eliminated any respondents who answered yes to having heard about the cluster model that DCPS uses for the nurses, so we could ensure unbiased results. The survey found that 71% of students with chronic health conditions have had at least one scenario where their needs were not met by a nursing staff of the building. While some think it is easy to consider the population negligible, it's important to note that about 40% of school-aged children have chronic health conditions, according to the CDC, making this statistic undeniable. The most at-risk students are put in danger by the model of shifting nurses that DCPS uses. Even as DCPS claims on their website that they work hard to build the capacity of schools to develop and coordinate health services and wellness strategies that empower students. Despite those claims, health services have only rolled back since the implementation of the cluster model. And students with chronic illnesses, at least at Walls, have certainly not been empowered by the systems put in place. However, the issue does not only affect students with chronic illnesses. 66.2% of all students surveyed have gone to the nurse's office at least once and found no one was there to aid them. Regardless of health status, issues can arise at school, and those issues do not follow the same schedule that our 3-day-a-week nurse does. Additionally, I want to point out that if this survey was able to reach other schools, as we have planned, our results might have been more shocking, since other DCPS may have less effective systems than we do. All students should have their needs met and feel safe at school, but the current cluster model of DCPS schools does not create this environment. Thank you.
Hi all. Oh my God, sorry. My name is Carlotta Rother, and I'm a junior with pre-osteoporosis and anemia at School Without Walls, and I'm the co-vice president of the Health Justice Club. I've personally experienced the challenges and risks associated with limited access to nurses during school hours. I'm aware that at any point in the day, I could faint or break a bone during gym class, and the idea that there is a large chance the school nurse will not be available is something that adds to my stress. Currently, our school only has a nurse available 3 times a week, and some DCPS schools only have a nurse available once a week. Having such limited access to nurses poses significant limitations for students like myself who require extensive medical attention at any given moment. Until Health Justice Club, I didn't even know who our 2 medical health practitioners at School Without Walls were, and neither did 52% of students surveyed by the Health Justice Club. In case of an emergency, these students won't know where to go, which poses an even bigger threat for the more than 40% of students with chronic illnesses, according to the CDC. Living with chronic health conditions necessitates consistent care and support, particularly during the school day, as students are spending up to 8 hours at school. Anemia and pre-osteoporosis are conditions that require vigilant management in order to prevent further complications and ensure ideal health outcomes. However, the infrequent presence of school nurses greatly impedes our ability to receive the necessary assistance and guidance. The consequences of inadequate nurse support in our school extends beyond just myself. My best friend suffers from type 1 diabetes and is threatened with a diabetic emergency at any given moment. Furthermore, another one of my friends has POTS and ended up fainting in class. And when the nurse wasn't there, the students were at a loss at who to call. These few moments of confusion could have led to much more serious health consequences. The lack of nurses does not just impact our health, but it impacts our academic performance. When I feel as if I am on the brink of an anemic attack, I don't feel comfortable going to school, as there's always a chance the nurse will not be there. meaning I'm missing valuable education material. Without readily available medical assistance, students may face difficulties managing their conditions effectively, leading to an increase in absences, decreased concentration in class, and heightened anxiety about their health. I urge the board to take our research and ideas shared through Naya and Naomi's testimonies into consideration in order to address the nursing shortage in DCPS schools that has had such a pervasive impact on me and my education. Thank you for your time.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lucy Cosgrove, and I'm a member of the Health Justice Club at School Without Walls. I am one of the many students at my school who suffers from a chronic illness called postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, or POTS, which is a dysautonomic condition that causes fainting, nausea, dizziness, and many more difficult symptoms. My condition causes me to often need breaks, snacks, and a place to lie down. It is also hard to convey to an outsider how I am feeling or what I need when these symptoms occur. The needs of my condition, in conjunction with the lack of a full-time nurse, has caused me to miss a lot of school, since I do not always feel confident in the safety and health measures that my school can offer under the nurse cluster system that DCPS schools currently use. I struggle with both my condition and keeping up with my school content as a result of my condition, and this inequity stems from the 3-day-a-week schedule that our nurse has, or rather the nearly 70 school days a year that no medical professional is there to support me in the likely case of enhanced symptoms. I can only imagine the fear of students with POTS at schools that are worse off in their nursing schedule than Walls is. As a junior and a member of the Health Justice Club, I see it as my duty to create a more health-aware and caring environment in the DCPS school system for those my age and in the following grades. That is why it is so crucial that each school has a designated full-time nurse, one that is aware of my condition and one that I can count on being there when I need assistance. Although I understand the impact of the nursing shortage in DC and the current impracticality of having one nurse in every DCPS school, I also want to reaffirm that it is well within DCPS's ability and responsibility to help address the nursing shortage from its roots and following suit with increased nursing staffing for schools. For it is not just me, since many students throughout DCPS have chronic illnesses. So I urge you to please create a more caring, understanding, and safe school environment by making progress towards addressing the nursing shortage in DC and DCPS. Thank you.
All right, I can first 100% say, oh, this does not feel on, but I can 100% say the W2 stands with these students requiring a nurse in every school. It is ridiculous that we don't have one. I know our union has taken a stance on it before for years and will continue to do so. And unfortunately, it's gotten worse instead of better, which is frustrating, but very nice to hear from these students about that. So my name is Laura Fuchs. I've been teaching at HD Woodson in Ward 7 since 2007. Today I'm here to ask, what is your commitment to building a democratic society and to democracy itself? Our local public schools once again need your help, need your voice. Guess what? I gave this testimony 5 years ago, and here we go again. Alongside our parents and students as we fight to preserve our democracy. Neighborhood public schools are the foundation of our society and our future. And when are we going to be serious about making sure they're receiving and spending the money they deserve to benefit all our students? Ultimately, we put our money where our mouths are, and the decision-making process of how the money gets spent is one of the cornerstones of that democracy. Despite promises that are made that every single year to make progress or the process more transparent, DC has yet to deliver on that promise in either DCPS or the charter schools. The situation is dire. Several of our middle schools east of the river, Kelly Miller, Kramer, and Sousa, and more, are facing extreme budget cuts. These cuts are not entirely visible, and this is in large part due to the lack of real transparency in DCPS and the endless spin from the mayor's team. If you look at the published budget sheet for Kelly Miller, it is slated to lose around $360,000 from last year. It is the highest. When you look at Sousa's budget, they're actually slated to gain about $42,000. It doesn't seem completely catastrophic compared to previous years, but when Sousa had to discuss how to budget for this school year, they're talking about cutting positions off every single grade level. So they will be down to 2 instead of 3 for a middle school across all subjects. So people are going to be doubling up instead of having dedicated teachers. So the question is then, why are people cutting 7 to 8 school personnel and slashing non-personal spending if we have the most historic budget in history? But they're not alone. In DCPS, 77 schools will be cutting back on how much they can spend. From research provided by the WTU, this loss of purchasing power is over $1 million for 24 schools. That's between like 1 million to 4.5 million in lost purchasing power. 10 or more lost 750,000 to $1 million in purchasing power. The average loss is $784,000. About 6 teachers. 40 of the 77 affected schools are gaining enrollment, so that does not explain it. We cannot retain teachers if we can't retain a budget. We can't implement SEL if we can't retain a budget. This has been consistently the case. We have been having to make cuts to staffing year over year. COVID kind of gave us a little leeway, and now we're back to cutting again. We have to decide as a system if we want to treat our schools correctly. We have to stop robbing our schools and their opaque programming, and DCPS needs to be held accountable for what they're doing with our money so that the schools that need the most don't see the biggest cuts. Thank you.
Thank you all. We will now start with the round of member questions, starting with Representative Yarkin.
Hi, it's nice to see you all. Thank you all for your testimony for the Health Justice Club. Thank you for bringing that to light. I didn't know the impact that the absence of school nurses has on students with chronic illness. I only think about it in the context of, me not being able to get ice packs. So thank you for speaking about that. And Ms. Fuchs, I want to give you a chance to talk about the impact that the cuts will have on teacher workload, and then the quality of education that students will get after these teachers aren't allowed to focus on their subjects.
Thank you. So, a lot of it does come down to, especially it seems like at the middle school level, that seems to be where the cuts are being made, which I find shocking because middle school is usually the area we're all like honed in on, is like this area needs some assistance. From what I know, like, for example, Kramer Middle School, Ward 8, and the sound of like the teachers there, they're doing pretty amazing things and they're seeing growth, but a lot of that comes from being able to do this flexible scheduling, allowing them a lot more time to collaborate and work together as educators to serve their students. It is a very small student population, but it really makes, from what they say, they are walking the walk. But if they're losing 7 to 8 positions, they can't maintain that. There's just no way. So it's like if we're seeing things that are working and we're investing in that, then we need to continue to invest even if it's a small school. SUSA, as I mentioned, teachers have been telling us that like basically they're cutting back kind of across the board. They were already worried about getting moved, and now they're seeing these major cuts to their programming, and they're worried, they serve students in Ward 7 and 8. How can they really continue to serve the kids if a teacher has to do 6th and 7th grade now instead of just being dedicated to one or the other and allowing them to really invest in those students? So we do see the student population, what people are able to do, any type of flexibility or work that's being done, it's hard to maintain if we have to cut people. And unfortunately, we don't know the full extent of it because of that lack of transparency, because of the mayor's delayed budget. We don't know what schools have had to submit. We don't know like if DCPS bailed a few of them out. We just have no clue, and we won't know until it's almost too late, and people have to go make decisions for their careers, unfortunately, that leave the schools in the lurch when they might get money back from the council. I don't know. It's just a mess. It shouldn't be this way. It's unnecessary. And there's a lot of questions about where the money is going. If we're getting historic amounts of money, why is DCPS central office soaking up so much of it and then putting so much of the burden on the schools? So, not great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Representative Best.
So I don't have any questions, but I definitely want to say like I agree as well. We should have nurses in all of the schools. And just want to say, like, continue to keep the pressure. And so if you want, after I can, like, talk about, like, some strategic ways of approaching this after the meeting, if you want. Cool.
That would be great. Thank you.
No problem.
Representative Chang.
Thanks for coming out. I am curious what the response from the administration has been as you've been raising these points with school administration.
School administration has generally been pretty supportive. I think also kind of bringing it back to what Henderson asked, I think it was like about the, or no, sorry, it was Yarkin who asked it. It was about the workload when teachers are kind of more, teachers are cut and the teachers are more alone in their departments. I think that kind of extends into nursing. I think our nurse at School Without Walls definitely feels a lot of pressure, and I think that she is in support of having a system in which she can really dedicate her time to one school, and in which other nurses in DC can really dedicate their time to one school. So generally it's been positive. I mean, School Without Walls has always been a place where students are encouraged to express what they feel and the changes that they want to see in their communities, so yeah.
And have you been in touch with other agencies in DC to date and or other student groups?
We have not, but we plan to, and I think Evie, who's going to testify later, is going to talk about maybe collaborating with the DCNA, I think, the DCNA. Yeah, and we've like reached out to them via email because they're obviously also very passionate about this issue. So yeah, that's definitely something that we're going to look forward to in the future.
And Laura, from the WTU side, what have you learned in the advocacy to date on this particular issue that the students might benefit from knowing?
I mean, definitely the nurses have been advocating for it. There was legislation. At one point, it seemed really close that we were going to have the nurse in every school. It was legislated, but it was never funded, which is, of course, the big question mark. Talking with nurses, DCPS basically claims none of them want to work for the price that we're going to pay, which I guess is kind of the trick, because there's a national nursing shortage, so then you need to pay them commensurate to what they have to do. And I think sometimes school nurses in particular are not respected as the professionals they are and are treated almost like an aide when it comes to like their pay. It's not great. Step above, but it's not great. So I do think that DCPS and our system as a whole would need to really invest and work with our nurses and the nursing union to get them in place and then treat them with respect, because I remember during COVID we were standing side by side being like, what is going on? Like, y'all are not giving them any supplies and they're going straight into these schools, like, and they're going to be trying to protect our students and themselves. So there's been a long history of challenges.
Thank you.
Representative Goulet.
Well, thank you all. This was really incredible testimony. You know, I was lucky to work for Vince Gray as the committee director for the Health Committee when he approved this legislation. And our strategy on funding it was, obviously it had to be approved subject to appropriations because you can't fund the whole thing in 1 year. There's no way you'll be able to get from where we are now to there in 1 year. So we'd add funding each year. The problem really we had was DC Health was not supportive about hiring the nurses. They wanted to do the health tech model or allied health professionals or whatever you call them. So we need to impress upon them the importance of this, because when you talk to parents, when you talk to students, they match exactly what your survey says, that people don't want the techs, they want a full-time school nurse 40 hours a week in every school. Now the State Board of Ed put this in our budget letter asking them to increase funding for this. And where we want to see it is in the DC Health children's school nurse contract, because that's where it's got to be loaded up. So if we can increase the pay there, we can be more competitive in the region. Now what you've talked about is the downward spiral we're seeing from the cluster model, because if you already have nurses that aren't paid enough and then you take away their home base and you make them float around from school to school, then they have less incentive to stay because they're not connected to their school communities. So I'm excited to work with you. I know you're going to come in and speak before the council on this. You're continuing the School Without Walls tradition of doing great advocacy, so I can't wait to work with you on getting that together. And Ms. Fuchs, I agree with you. I mean, I put a lot of the blame for this on Chancellor Farabee. There's absolutely no reason we should be putting 6 years of inflation increases, because he didn't negotiate in good faith on the teacher's contract, into 1 fiscal year. And that's the problem, is we're seeing schools forcing to eat a 22% increase to teachers, a 19.8% increase to principals because they got behind 4 years on the teacher's contract. They need to do this year because it's expired again, and then they need to do the next fiscal year that we're working on. Principals is 1 year behind that, which is 5. But it's just unacceptable. It really truly is something extraordinary to see 6 years being crammed into 1, and then you add on top of that a recession. The schools in Ward 3 are facing between a 5 to 24% cut in purchasing power this year because of these increases. So, you know, we're going to do everything we can do to advocate for full funding. We need to put our schools first. I think the student voice is going to be really important in that. in terms of saying, with all these competing priorities in the city, education of our public school students needs to be number one, and we need to put that ahead of any other priorities in this budget and make sure we're not cutting our teachers before we do anything else. So does anybody else want to add anything else in the remaining 20 seconds here? I just want to thank you all for coming out tonight. Really great testimony. I look forward to hearing you advocate at the council. Fantastic job.
Yeah. I just wanted to thank you for offering those supports, and I wanted to note that Naya is probably going to, Naya is definitely going to talk about some solutions that we've come up with, and increased funding would also be preferred.
Well, thank you all. Thanks so much.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you. Thank you to the students for forming a health justice club and taking the issues that you are faced with and turning it into action. That's exactly what we hope to see. I hope that you will be successful. As Representative Goulet said, we did include an ask for in our budget letter that we would be able to fund a nurse at every school. It definitely helps to have student voices, those of you who are most affected, advocating for that here, definitely in front of the council when the time comes. Ms. Fuchs, you spoke to this a little bit already, but I'm struck by the city having really big goals, like we're trying to tackle crime, we're trying to tackle chronic absenteeism. What's the impact of school budget cuts on those bigger goals?
I mean, certainly it depends on what schools decide to cut, and the mayor does love to place the blame on schools, being like, they made these decisions. It's like, right, but no one decides to cut something if they don't have to. So, I mean, it could be that a school could decide to cut some, an extra registrar who might then, pile more work on the existing one if they're lucky enough to have two. I mean, bigger class size is then harder to follow up on for those of us who teach multiple classes. And if we have, 20 to 30% of our students chronically absent and we're having to make phone calls every time, I mean, I'll just be honest, I can't make all my phone calls every time it happens. It's just not possible. And so, then more people could fall through, more students could fall through the cracks of the supports that we do try to provide. Certainly, like our non-personnel spending just gets, slammed because we do try to prioritize personnel over all things, and I think most schools do. And that can, potentially remove funds that could have been used for incentives or other things, which might, probably not be make or break, but certainly could be nice to have to offer to students. And, causes more people probably to go to Donors Choose or other things like that. So, it certainly can't help. I do think, we have to be strategic in how we're spending money, and money is going to DCPS. The question is kind of on what, and I think there's just a lot of overhead, and there's still a major lack of transparency about where the money is going, and even like how a teacher's salary is calculated, right? They love to slip little things in that are really central office costs, and then put it on the school in the teacher funds, like our fingerprinting, for example, gets factored into our costs. Bonuses, which if it was up to me wouldn't exist, gets factored into these costs. Like there's a lot of extra things that get factored into each teacher's costs that aren't always what you think is just straight up our salary and benefits. So that can then push more costs kind of into the schools and make it seem like Central is actually legally the size it's supposed to be when it's not.
Yeah, thank you. I think we are going to have a budget panel next month, and that raises some good questions for us to ask. Thank you.
Representative O'Leary.
Ms. Fuchs, I want you to start and tell me if there's any progress on the contract.
That's cute. No. Why? That would require the mayor's team to bargain in good faith.
But you're meeting during the regular day now?
They are meeting.
Uh-huh.
And I think some council members' teams have shown up, and I do think that is much appreciated because DCPS is on slightly better behavior when they are being monitored by someone that's not the WTU. If they don't.
Okay, and I want to thank you. I'm cutting you off because I want to go back to something that when y'all are talking about a full-time nurse in a school, right? And some of you have health problems, right? So on the day when the nurse is at another school, who takes care of you? anybody can answer that. I want to pursue this, so.
Of course. So I think it's kind of been touched on in other things, how the work falls onto other people in the school, other staff
Right,
members.
okay, but they're not a health professional.
No, they are not.
Okay,
They're
and that's the thing, and you can't just wait to get sick on the day that the nurse shows up, right?
Yeah.
And y'all are talking about, there's only 4 of you, and you're talking about, like, half of you were talking about having some health problems, all right? We're talking about every child in this city who has the capacity to have a health problem on any given day. And half of the schools in the city don't have nurses. They're floating nurses. I just want the public to understand that, all right? And I'm saying that because the mayor a month or 2 ago came out saying she had $500 million that she was going to share with Ted Leonsis for the Wizards and Capitals to stay in D.C., all right? And we're talking about not being able to pay a health professional for every single school in the city, which should be mandatory by law, and to pay our teachers, because your teachers at School Without Walls are working without a contract, all right? Talk to your parents about that, because here's the next thing, because we've already talked about the green initiative, all right? I challenge y'all to work with the teachers and start advocating for the teachers' contract. Not only the nurses, but for the teachers' contract. I was at a rally the other day at Jackson Reed, and there were about 100 teachers from Jackson Reed and schools around that. But the flame needs to be getting a little hotter right now, because this is an emergency. The teachers need to be paid, and we need to have nurses in every school. So y'all can start hitting the streets on that. I can't tell you to do that.
Representative Williams.
I appreciate your passion, Representative O'Leary. And students, thank you. I'm glad to know that like you feel there's some support like from your administration, and that you are channeling your advocacy into a useful club. And you know, I wish I were more hopeful and optimistic that we would be able to solve this issue. But I think it's not going to necessarily get better until we continue organizing collectively and effectively, and you know, with us as allies, with the WTU as allies, and then you know, being able to try and find this in the budget. I mean, Ms. Fuchs, can you comment too? Like, also, I'm not as familiar with nurses at like in DCPS schools, but more so in like the charter sector. There are 2 agencies, right, that staff nurses. Is that true? Does anyone know? Would you guys, do you know where the staffing, like the agencies come from for the nurses?
We haven't really focused on researching that. We were talking with Representative Goulet earlier about the agencies that staff DCPS's nurses, and we'll definitely do more research into that and how we can communicate to them that that we need to pay these nurses more so that they're more inclined to be working at DCPS schools, and that the conditions shouldn't be that they have to shift between schools throughout the day or throughout the week. And so.
Well, I think just to quickly add, I mean, our position has always been they should be unionized nurses, not contracted out, not contracted with outside groups. Like, it's just always been better when we staff them from government agencies, and we just hire our own instead of trying to like, go through other groups, which usually come with additional overhead. Like, we should just pay the good government wages that we can afford to pay if we choose to do so, and that would then create more dedicated nurses to the community that can't just be interchanged by some outside company who decides how they want to staff things to meet their bottom line, and instead they're meeting our bottom line as the district.
Right. And I agree with you, but like in the interim, given like the severity, I mean, I want to just like dramatize this as a crisis, but it's a severe gaping hole of needs that are continually not being met. Like, would the WTU support like contract nurses in the interim while trying to work towards like unionized professionals?
Certainly, like, our first goal is a nurse in every building. I think it's just that we find that like when we're we're contracting with behavior health, right? Like the social workers that are in the WTU and the social workers who come through DBH are always more consistent than
Right.
the social workers that we get contracted through others. And that's not through the fault of the people. That's just these companies and just the way they operate tends to create more of a cyclical nature versus people who get to be hired at the school and get to stay there.
Yeah, that context makes sense. And thank you all for showing up today. And I hope you'll continue to stay motivated and to think strategically with the allies that you have.
Vice President Patterson.
Thank you. Thank you, students, for coming down. I have a son who has some real severe needs, and he has an EpiPen at school. Me and his mother fear if there's not someone to administer, if he should have an episode, and there's not someone there to administer that EpiPen for him, because his throat will close and he will die. So I'm with you on this and hope that we can find a solution. I know there's a shortage, as you said, but that we can find a solution to making sure that we have a nurse every day in our schools. Ms. Fuchs, I appreciate you and your vigilance. I follow your tweets, if we still call them tweets, on X or whatever we call it at this particular time, about budgets and what schools, and specifically east of the rivers. I've seen some of your tweets and stuff like that on which schools are impacted by how much. It's kind of like, I'm going to give you 12.4, watch what I do over here. Don't watch what I'm taking out of your hand over here type of thing is how it feels. But a year ago, when you came in front of us, we were talking about ESSER funding. And I asked you the question, was ESSER funding appropriately getting to your school to where you need it? And it seems as if that didn't even do well. And now that ESSER funds are ending, we have even a deeper crisis, so to speak, as far as we said, purchasing power. What I'd like to know from you in this last minute that I have, minute 30 seconds or so, is what do you see was the problem with why we supposedly had these funds that seem to didn't reach our classrooms, not our schools, but our actual classrooms, because that's what you and I were talking about a year ago, and the stage that we're in right now?
Well, we're about to get my favorite line, but it's mayoral control, in my opinion. Like, too much is being decided top down and not really in conjunction with what we need. So we come up with things like high-impact tutoring, and that sounds great. What in the world was that? Did we actually get those funds to use on something? That was unclear. I don't know if our school even had them, but it wasn't supposed to be used on staffing anyway, so I think at our school level, it was not felt in the first place, nor will it be missed. But it's central, and this is where it tends to come into play, right? Central office, whenever they get more money from the council, from the federal government, from anywhere, they start their pet projects. Eventually that money goes somewhere, or is supposed to go somewhere else in the first place, like when they were robbing us of our at-risk money for a while. They were just doing all the little pet projects. They wanted to keep doing them and not give us our money by law. And that's what I think we start to see happening. That's when they start shifting costs so they can then keep other money somewhere. It's just like a big shell game where they're moving money around so they can maintain whatever epic staffing levels they want to maintain downtown while they claim to be cutting only vacancies. And then the schools have to face the brunt of it and cut people who are actively working.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you all again for your testimony. That concludes this round of witnesses. So while you all leave the table, I will call the next round.
Thank you.
Evie Kaur, Lori Danley, Andre Aina, Ashan Abdi Varniab, Ethan Henshaw, Darius Wagner, and Naya Noljun. And we can start on this side when you're ready.
Hi, my name is Evie Kaur, and I'm a junior at School Without Walls and co-vice president of the Health Justice Club, as well as a student who has witnessed firsthand consequences of inadequate medical support. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of having qualified medical professionals readily available on our campuses. As my friends have already established, the nursing system that DCPS uses is particularly problematic for students with medical conditions. However, I want to make it clear that the nursing system that DCPS uses is a hardship for all of us. As members in a community with insufficient health staffing, me, other students, and teachers need to pick up the slack. For example, my best friend Brady has type 1 diabetes. On those days of the week that the nurse isn't in the building, I'm more conscious about whether he might be experiencing a low blood sugar or managing his medication correctly. After all, on those days, there's no safety net for him in the building other than me and one of the other few members of the community who would know what to do if something goes wrong. He's not the only member of our community who is affected by the nursing system. I know 3 students in our grade with something called POTS, which is a syndrome related to reduced blood volume that occurs when standing or laying down quickly. Some of you may know what this is, but I certainly did not before joining the Health Justice Club. All I knew was that there were students who would experience fainting spells during class, and a teacher could only respond with, "Try to put water in her face," when one student did faint. I think this attests to the fact that no matter how hard we try, community members cannot pick up the slack for a missing nurse. But the lack of nurses hasn't only tightened my stress for those with chronic illnesses, but in my community. Students get sick, students get hurt, and students need medical advice any day of the week, not on a schedule. Nurses can help students with their physical and emotional well-being, offer guidance on healthy habits, and be a trusted adult to turn to in times of need. Building a positive connection with nurses promotes a safe and nurturing environment for students to thrive in. But this positive relationship, again, could only be possible with a nurse present every day and not on a schedule. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Naya, and I am a junior at School Without Walls and Chief of External Research for the Health Justice Club. Given our prior testimonies and the established importance of nurses being stationed in each DCPS school, we hope to propose solutions. Hiring a full-time nurse to every school building is the ideal solution, but we know that DC needs to alleviate its nursing shortage for that to be possible. DC's 2 nursing problems are nurses not staying in DC and nurses are generally older. According to DCPSPolicyCenter.org, in a period of 8 months in 2020 to 2021, the district lost nearly 20% of its nurses to both relocation and retirement. According to a study at Simmons University, 55% of nurses in the U.S. are over the age of 50. These 2 factors compound so that DC has seen one of the lowest nurse availability to nurse demand ratios in modern history. Although the issue transcends DCPS, cost-effective solutions at the DCPS level can help to alleviate the nursing shortage. Also, pressure from this body on the council for broader initiatives that will ultimately affect DCPS are vital for this goal. DCPS can help with the nursing shortage by creating systems at schools to help currently unlicensed medical practitioners to get licenses. Those unlicensed medical practitioners must pass an exam called the NCLEX in order to get their licenses. And if DCPS helps those staff members to study and pass their exams, more nurses will be in circulation. They will be more encouraged to stay at DCPS, and the program will look attractive to other practitioners. DCPS can help those nurses study by creating internship programs at DCPS schools in which students can intern for unlicensed medical practitioners so that the staff can review skills they need for their exam. Simultaneously, those interns will likely be attracted to the nursing industry, which in the long term can help to bring youth to the aging nursing population, which will suffer a surge of retirement as its older population approaches their 60s. Walls already has an internship program and can be a model for an initiative like this. DCPS may also offer spaces and time slots for study sessions for practitioners trying to pass the NCLEX, increase the availability of medical-focused content for students, and excuse practitioners for NCLEX testing days in order to meet the goal of improving the nursing industry in DC. Additionally, joining the Nursing Licensure Compact, or the NLC, is of utmost importance for addressing the nursing shortage in DC and subsequently DCPS. The DC Council is already pending this legislation in its Health Committee, but the last action was 5 months ago. Joining the Nursing Licensure Compact has proven to dampen the outflow of nurses by 11% in member states. According to the Hamilton Project at Brookings University, other states have already made use of the NLC in positive ways that DC can follow. According to data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor, our neighbors, Virginia and Maryland, saw increases in the growth of nurses per year after joining the NLC in 1999 and 2005 respectively. There is certainly more that DC can do in order to increase the number of licensed nurses, but I hope that these two solutions demonstrate both their impact and relationship with schools. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. I'm honored to be before members of the board today. My name is Darius Wagner, and I'm a student at Georgetown University, and today I'm here to speak about a very important issue and how we can take action. Justin Clarence Thomas, in 2023, a noted beneficiary of affirmative action who has long decried the practice since reaping its benefits, said, "Were this court to have the courage to forbid the use of racial discrimination in admissions, legacy preferences, and similar practices might quickly become less popular." Now, Justice Thomas surprisingly doesn't state his support for ending legacy as he does affirmative action, but Thomas's downright wrong and strikingly offensive perspective on affirmative action as racial discrimination won, and in 2023, the Supreme Court overturned decades of precedent, ruling that affirmative action was unconstitutional. This will undoubtedly reduce the diversity of our nation's highest institutions, and we must be proactive in reducing these harmful impacts. Still, he does concede that legacy would become unpopular, and that is true. 70% of DC residents disagree with the practice of legacy admissions. And I know I do not have to tell you that legacy admissions is bad. Legacy admissions gives a ladder to the overwhelming white and wealthy families while shutting out students from underrepresented and overlooked backgrounds. It is fundamentally unfair that universities are allowed to continue this practice benefiting the wealthy while being forced to end race-conscious admissions that uplift communities that have been historically and continuously discriminated against and marginalized. At Georgetown alone, there are more legacy students than black students and Hispanic students, respectively. We cannot allow a system that outwardly perpetuates mechanisms of systemic racism and classism to remain. We can act, and we must. As a student organization, we have met with 11 of the 13 city council members, and majority has said they support ending this practice and would support a bill to end legacy admissions. We need your help to get this over the finish line. We have a community letter that is urging the city council to take action against legacy admissions, and your signature would go a long way. We think if this board can pass a resolution condemning legacy admissions and urging the council to take action, we can once and for all be on the pathway to ending this shameful practice. As a tutor at Drew Elementary School here in DC, in Southeast DC, who works with the program Life Pieces to Masterpieces, I see young black and brown students every day who just deserve an equal shot, but will not have equal opportunities due to a background they cannot control and a system rigged against them. We can change that, and many people in this room have dedicated their entire lives to changing that. So let's stand up for those who have overcome mountains just to be denied a fair shot. Let's stand up for those who have been shut out of education because of their zip code, income status, race, and more. We can end this practice and send a message to the entire country and to those communities that are so left behind. Your help will be paramount. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the State Board of Education. My name is Ethan Henshaw. I'm a sophomore at Georgetown University and one of many hundreds of students and professors this year who have been involved in a movement to make our university more accessible to low-income applicants. As a student at this university and a Pell Grant recipient, I can speak firsthand about its lack of financial accessibility and its lack of desire to become more financially accessible. There's a desperate need for outside organizations like the State Board and the City Council to force the hand of the university, or else it will never improve. As it stands, 20% of our student body comes from the top 1%, and 74% of our student body comes from the top quintile. There are more students at our university from the top 1% than there are from the bottom 60%. Pell-eligible students make up about 12% of our student body, despite making up 30% of undergraduate students nationwide. Of the top 280 universities, we rank 240 in terms of Pell-eligible students. The New York Times says that we give a bigger preference to wealthy students than any of the Ivy League or Ivy Plus schools. If you compare students with the same GPA and test scores, the wealthier student is 3 times more likely to get into Georgetown. And I can say, being on campus firsthand, you feel it. You feel it in your classes, in your clubs, and everything you do. There's always a sense that what affects you and what troubles you doesn't matter, and the university really isn't built for you. It is incredibly frustrating because schools like Georgetown promise incredible economic opportunity and mobility, no matter where you come from or what economic background you come from. But unfortunately, almost everyone there comes from the same background. Two of the policies that contribute to this great inequality are the highly discriminatory practices of legacy preference and donor preference in admissions. Such policies give preference to white and wealthy students at the expense of low-income, first-generation, and minority applicants. Especially in the wake of the affirmative action decision by the Supreme Court, legislators on the national level and in all state legislatures are waking up to the great injustice and hypocrisy of the system and pushing legislation to ban it. Bills have popped up from Republicans and Democrats alike in Maryland, Virginia, Massachusetts, California, in the Senate, in the House, and much more, but not, however, in D.C., despite its majority support. 70%, as Darius said, of D.C. voters support a bill to ban the policy, and even on Georgetown's campus there is consensus. Our petition gathered signatures from over 1,100 students, faculty, and alumni, including Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, who urged us to get a bill passed in the D.C. Council. I understand the State Board is not capable of passing legally binding resolutions. We came to ask for your support in passing a resolution condemning the practice and urging the Council to act. We also ask that board members sign our letter urging the Council to act once this meeting is done. I would love to have the opportunity to talk with some of you. But at the moment, Georgetown alone gets $30 million in tax exemptions each year and millions of dollars in contracts from the city, and yet so little goes to helping the community. About 1.5% of our student body comes from the city, and of those, most come from elite private schools like Georgetown Prep and Georgetown Visitation, and we believe this is incredibly unfair to the city and incredibly unfair to students from underrepresented backgrounds. We ask that you please join us in our efforts. I hope that you'll take the time to discuss this and sign our letter. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, members of the DC Board of Education. I'm Andre Ina, CEO of Third Eye Education Analytics. I'm here today in collaboration with Education Reform Now, Advocacy DC, to speak about our commitment to improving student achievement in math and the equitable and responsible use of AI to support our teachers and students. So at Third Eye Education Analytics, we use modern data analytics to provide students, schools, and educators with effective tools for tracking and supporting student achievement. I personally work as a data specialist, and I have direct experience working in schools, particularly in the area of mathematics, across several domains: special education, general education, response to intervention, and of course now as an administrator. Through our collaboration with ERNA-DC, Third Eye together have underscored several key insights that have helped shape this testimony today. And I think I want to highlight some the imperative issues here and the ability to enhance our approach to math education. So statewide approach to improving DC literacy has shown a lot of promise, but we've yet to implement a systemic approach for mathematics. As we mentioned earlier in this meeting, ESSER funds are ending, and high-impact tutoring and other evidence-based programs are not going to be happening anymore. So, and to exacerbate this issue, I think 78% of DC public school students did not meet math expectations. So it's not just about missed lessons. I think this is a red flag for our future and the STEM abilities of our students going forward. I think that establishing a math support fund to help with some of these lack of funds would be strategically beneficial. And I think that strategy starts with creating a task force, research task force, to oversee these improvements in education, provide us with high-quality content, instructional materials, teacher assistance, and evaluations. I'll quickly talk about the Third Eye program. We were able to make some great milestones last year. We were able to analyze students' past performance with current math and reading diagnostics. This helped us make personalized learning paths for these students. We're also able to analyze vast amounts of curriculum and information on assessment data to help us provide further insights and trends into what we're seeing. I'm imploring the Board of Education to create an AI task force as well, to effectively incorporate AI as a learning tool and a subject of study. We need to comprehensively look into and prepare our system for leveraging AI's potential and safeguarding against its potential risks and implications. Establishing clear guidelines and supports, and using AI to tailor some teacher abilities. I implore you to support this call to action. I know it's a bit different than your typical call to action, but there's nuanced approaches, and I think there are many things we could look into and benefit from with the task force. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for your testimony, and we will begin with the member round of questions, starting with Representative Yarkin.
Hi, thank you all for your testimony. I have a few questions for the Georgetown students. Have you spoken to the Georgetown administration or any other administrations of institutions of higher education? And you mentioned that you talked to Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton. Have you spoken to the council members, and do you know what the support, what your support looks like on the council?
Yeah, I can start that out. Talking with the administration, we've had some problems meeting with the administration in good faith. For example, we were invited to speak at the Faculty Senate meeting to discuss this among professors, and then a day later, a rule was made saying students couldn't speak at those meetings. We had a meeting with our Dean of Admissions that was very interesting. He basically alluded to legacy being this form of reverse class conscious admissions, whereas you can ensure that a certain amount of your student body is more wealthy to prevent paying out higher financial aid. And I do know that they can pay out that financial aid. Since last May, they received $2 billion in pledged donations alone, on top of already $3 billion endowment. They have the money for that financial aid. And then, council. So we've spoken to 11 offices. I believe 8 right now said that they would vote for it if it went up. We have 5 likely co-introducers. We have a meeting coming up with a sponsor. We've just had a hard time getting a sponsor. A lot of people are very fearful of leading this, and they've asked us to really go into the community and see if it has support among members like yourselves, the State Board of Education, among community members. And so we think that that could help us push it across the line and get someone to actually lead on the bill.
Yeah.
Is there something else?
And to build on, to go back to our legislative strategy, much of what we heard from the offices, have they said they would support a bill like this? They would potentially co-sponsor a bill like this, but many of the explanations we've gotten is because budgeted season or our office is trying to sort of prioritize, find ways to prioritize different forms of legislation.
And do you see in your everyday life at school, does the impact of legacy admission, I know you probably don't know directly who is legacy and who is not, but do you think that it affects the culture of the school having a lot of upper class kids there?
Definitely. If you go to Georgetown, the elitism and the notion of a Georgetown bubble is definitely something that you will hear on our campus. And as a Georgetown Scholar Program, which is the program for students from many middle to low income backgrounds, many students will tell you that they feel it in the classroom, they feel it in social environments, they feel it in clubs. And as we mentioned before, there are more students from from the upper percentage class than there are from the bottom 60%. So it's definitely a real effect.
Thank you.
Representative Best.
Thank you. Thank you. I believe Naya is it Naya? I love the internship idea. Like continue to refine it. Yeah, it's not always about just like identifying the problems, but finding solutions too. And I think that's like a great start. I'm going to move down the line. The hypocrisy of eliminating affirmative action while continuing to keep 2 other forms of affirmative action in play. Because we don't often call legacy preference or donor preference affirmative action, but it is. So count me in. I'll sign up. I'll do whatever it takes. AI and math, read my mind. We have to address these issues. And so can you tell me a little more about like the research that you all do and your company as well?
We first started off more our initial focus was on data, but as you can imagine, as we are upon somewhat of an AI revolution, AI has been in our phones, Siri is also AI, but now it's more on our fingertips where we can use it more readily to integrate different platforms, use our data more intentionally, and alleviate some of the stress that comes with trying to figure out what a student needs before maybe they take a bunch of assessments and it's months have gone down the road. So in terms of the research we've done, we did a pilot study working with students in a after-school summer program to just give it a go in more of a free reign environment where there wasn't the stress of a school day necessarily where they had to work on our platforms, but we used the data that we had to see trends, identify where students had gaps, and to fill them more acutely.
So why math and AI as we look to the future?
Right, so I think AI can be used in many different subject areas in education, but in particular to math, math has a certain framework where it's very systematic, very straightforward, and things build upon each other in a less abstract way than you would see in reading. In particular, if you look at the Common Core standards for math and reading, they look dramatically different. And in reading, you would see several grades that would just say, do this on a 3rd grade level, do this on a 4th grade level, do this on a 5th grade level, which is very abstract to understand what that means unless you are a professionally trained teacher. Whereas with math, it's very straightforward. The student is able to do this, the student is able to perform this execution of this concept. Again, they build upon each other, so it's easy to figure out if a student's missing gaps in between versus reading.
Thank you.
Representative Chang.
I think you've given us a lot to think about. Thank you. No questions at this time.
Representative Goulet.
I want to thank you all for your testimony tonight. To the students from Georgetown, definitely 100% will sign the letter. I'll support a resolution. And have you gotten to connect with either Education Reform Now or Democrats for Education Reform? They've been real leaders on this issue here in the city. Have you been able to link up with them at all on this?
Yeah, we've actually been in communication with Democrats for Reform Now, and they've been helping us get in contact with council offices and stuff.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, great. And you know, what if you're having a difficulty finding a sponsor down there? One thing we can do is not only approve a resolution. You know, if we vote, we can actually send legislation to the council too. So, if you're having difficulty with it, you know, we can send a bill to the chairman. The chairman will introduce a bill on behalf of the state board. So that's one option to consider, is you kind of strategically weigh how you try to best get this done. But I'm definitely 100% supportive of it, and you know, really excited you came out tonight to speak about it. So thank you so much for that. And you know, just to our students, I think it was Naya, you talked about some potential issues. I'd encourage you to look at 2 more, maybe as you expand the research on this. You know, one thing is, and this is something we could work on with you, is the idea of trying to expand DCPS programming that connects to UDC to really make nursing a field that, you know, our DC youth, you know, want to get into as a career. Because, I mean, it's something you'll never be short for a job in. If you're a nurse, you can work anywhere right now. So that would be one thing that we can really try to work with our public school system, charter side, you know, DCPS side, and you know, build those connections with UDC to get more nurses, homegrown nurses here in the city. So that's something I'd love to work with you on. The other issue is just looking at the housing issues for our nurses here. Maryland has a great program they use for teachers where if someone is working for a certain number of years, they basically can get down payment assistance to buy a home here in the city. And that would be something that we maybe should look at for school nurses who we want to stick with the profession long term. They would get a down payment assistance for the house, and then that would gradually be forgiven over a period of years that they work in DCPS. So it might be a good way to retain skilled young nurses who come into the system and then want to locate and live here in the city, because the cost of living here in the city can be a big impediment as well. I think it's one of the 3 big ones. I think it's cost of living. I think clearly the issue that pay disparities as well, particularly with PG County paying its nurses more under the new contract, and then just the issue of now being forced to move around without a home base under the cluster model, I think also hurts morale and it hurts retention. So I'm really excited to see you testify before the council. You've done such a great job here tonight, and I love the matching shirts. I love matching shirts. I think it really sends a message and makes you memorable. So great testimony and great presentation from all of you tonight. So thank you so much.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you again to the students for coming. I don't know if you've been asked to do this, but if you would submit your written testimony for the record, it would be helpful to be able to go back and look at that. Especially thankful for the solution-oriented approach that you've taken, so thank you. For the Georgetown students, I'm generally against legacy admissions and in favor of affirmative action. I'm not sure where the 272 program falls within that. I don't know if you know, but I would hate to see you know, an effort at legislation that, as an unintended consequence, made that program off limits. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, within our legislation, there is an exception for that program, and specifically for those who receive admissions benefits because they are descendants of slaves.
Okay, thank you.
We sat down with the former chair of the Education Committee, David Grosso, and he helped us write up a bill and try and figure out the carve-outs. So.
Okay. All right, thank you. No more questions.
Representative O'Leary.
The nurse advocates know how I feel about that. It's interesting to me that you brought up Clarence Thomas, because Clarence Thomas has a really interesting history. His life history is fascinating. But Clarence Thomas was, the way he got into college was in a special program for young black men all over the country who went to Holy Cross. And one of his classmates was Edward P. Jones, who's a graduate of Cardozo High School and is also a Pulitzer Prize winning novelist. And they were in school together under a complete program that was specialized for these young black men all over the country to be able to go to college when they couldn't get in college any other way. And that was him then. And now he's now. But it was just interesting to me that you brought that up. And I thought about there's a thin line between hypocrisy and irony. And I'll end on that.
Representative Williams.
Yeah, thank you all for your testimony. I'll be brief. Thank you for the communication as well over the past couple months. Similar to my colleague, Representative Henderson, I also am in support of affirmative action programs and would be happy to kind of support the initiative here in DC. So thank you. I have no further questions.
Vice President Patterson.
Thank you. I want to thank each one of you for your testimonies this evening. I want to speak to the Georgetown students. I'm a graduate of Georgetown as well. Hoya Saxa. I'm grappling with what you're proposing, and I'll tell you why. Okay, because I've actually attended some of the programs that discuss the subject and everything. And my question to you specifically: are we talking about all colleges that have legacy preferences, or just the elite colleges? First, I'll ask that question first.
So we're talking about all private universities in the area. However, our bill is also modeled sort of similarly from a bill on the federal level, which gives exceptions to predominantly minority-serving institutions.
Okay, and that was the question that I wanted to get to. So I specifically wanted to make sure that that was noted for the simple fact that I have a daughter. She was the first to get into a college that does have a preference. I didn't go to that particular college. She went to Spelman, but they do have a legacy preference. Now she has a little sister who wants to go to Spelman, and she wants that opportunity. So it's kind of hard as a parent when you say, okay, we've come up, a hard way. We don't have a lot of finances or anything like that. And we see our child go to a particular school that they've worked all their lives to go to. We've worked to get them there. They get there, they graduate. Then you have another child that's like, I want to be like my sister, and I want to go to that same college. Yeah. And for our historically black colleges, I just wanted to make sure that that was put out there, that, there is some nuances to what you're proposing and everything like that. Okay. And did you want to speak more on it?
Yeah, I guess for me, at predominantly white private institutions, at some of our best institutions, you see some of the worst diversity rates. Mm-hmm. And with legacy admissions, the people who predominantly benefit from that are wealthy, well-connected white families. Mm-hmm. And so, being that's the reality, it's starkly different at minority-serving institutions across the country.
But I do agree with you. I will say this because of knowing my daughter's experience at Spelman, the economic issue is still there, regardless of the nuance for the HBCUs, because of the children who are sent to specific schools tend to have parents who, if you know W.E. Du Bois, they're kind of like the talented 10th, so to speak, and they can make kids who is their first to go to college feel really low, you know, as their experience and stuff like that. So I hope we can look at that and change some of those nuances, but I appreciate it, and I will be supportive of what you're pushing forward. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for your testimony. That concludes the member questioning, and you may all leave the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that concludes our public witnesses as well.
All right. I want to thank all our public witnesses for their comments tonight. We sincerely appreciate it. As I said, I enjoyed each and every one who came before us. Always have a special place for our students, though. So thank you guys for coming here. Continue to advocate, continue to show up. I believe wholeheartedly that student voice is the most powerful voice. So thank you for being here. We will now move to vote on 3 state resolutions. I will look for a motion and a second for each resolution, followed by the Deputy Director reading the resolution into the record. Once the resolution is read into the record, we will have member discussions and 3-minute rounds of statements before roll call votes are conducted. We will now move to vote on State Resolution SR 24-8, appointing Kimberly Humphreys, Esquire, as Ombudsman for Public Education in the District of Columbia. Is there a motion? It's been properly moved by Representative Goulet. Do I have a second?
Second.
It has been properly seconded by Representative O'Leary. Okay. The motion, Deputy Director, will you read the resolution into the record?
State Board of Education resolution appointing Kimberly Humphrey Esquire as Ombudsman for Public Education, SR 24-8. Whereas the DC State Board of Education has authority over the appointment of the Ombudsman for Public Education under the Ombudsman for Public Education Establishment Act of 2007, effective June 12, 2007, as part of the Public Education Reform Amendment Act of 2007. Whereas the DC Official Code declares that the State Board must appoint a new ombudsman to fill the remainder of an unexpired term within 75 days of the occurrence of vacancy. Whereas at the public meeting on July 19, 2023, the State Board appointed Tony Kreiner to the position of Interim Ombudsman for Public Education until January 24, 2024, and directed the Executive Director to begin the hiring process for a permanent Ombudsman for Public Education. Whereas, at the public meeting on January 17, 2024, the State Board extended the term of the Interim Ombudsman for Public Education for an additional 75 days until April 8, 2024, or until a permanent Ombudsman for Public Education was appointed, whichever came first. And whereas the State Board conducted a rigorous application and selection process that included screening of applications, phone interviews, review of writing assignments, and in-person finalist interviews. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the State Board appoints Kimberly Humphrey, Esquire, to the position of Ombudsman for Public Education for a term of 5 years to begin on April 22, 2024, and be it finally resolved that the State Board fully supports Ms. Humphrey in her new role, as she embodies the qualities needed to ensure the Office of the Ombudsman for Public Education continues to serve as a neutral resource for students and their families in resolving complaints and concerns regarding public education.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Is there a discussion on the resolution regarding the ombudsman? Representative O'Leary?
I just wanted to mention that in the resolution it mentions the State Board conducted a rigorous application and selection process. And I happened to be part of that, and it was really rigorous. And we had a fabulous group of people who applied for the position. And we're very, very pleased with the selection.
Further discussion? Yes. Representative Henderson?
I'm excited to have Ms. Humphrey join and look forward to working with her. Also want to thank Tony Kreiner for her service. In all cases that I worked with her, she did fantastic work helping families in Ward 5. So I just want to make sure on this at this time we recognize her great work. Thank you.
Duly noted. Thank you, Representative Henderson. Other discussion? I'll close with kind of piggybacking on what you said, Representative Henderson. Ms. Kreiner did a great job in the interim position. It's not easy being the ombudsman in District of Columbia because there's so many issues that come before you and your staff on a regular basis, and they can come at you in a deluge at times. So we want to recognize and hold her up for all the work that she did, both in her position as ombudsman and also helping with the special ed hub. So want to give her those credit. And I also want to kind of co-sign to what Representative O'Leary mentioned, because I was also part of the process. We had some great people who want to work for the District of Columbia. This was not an easy process in the sense of how to pick the best person, because we just had some great talent before us and it was very tight. I appreciate everyone who participated in the process, including staff members, because we wanted to make sure the staff members had a voice in who they were going to have as a leader. So I want to thank everyone that participated in it and everything. So thank you. Okay. Seeing no further discussion, the motion is is that where we are?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Seeing no more discussion, the motion is adopted. SR 24. You call the roll.
And members, I'll be doing rotating alphabetical order for our votes. So Representative Yarkin,
Aye.
Representative Best,
Aye.
Representative Goulet,
Aye.
Representative Henderson,
Aye.
Representative O'Leary,
Aye.
Representative Williams,
Aye.
Vice President Patterson.
Aye. Aye. Sorry, frog in my throat.
SR 24-8 has passed unanimously.
Thank you. As I hear my neighbor chuckle. We will now move to vote on State Resolution SR 24-9, approving the District of Columbia's financial literacy standards. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been properly moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been properly second.
Mr. Vice President, could I move a motion to waive the reading of the resolution?
Okay. I believe, Deputy Director, you are serving as our parliamentarian. Is that proper? Can we do that?
I believe so. We have done it previously.
Okay.
But members of the staff can correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay. And are you asking Representative Goulet on this particular one, or are we asking for the remaining resolutions that we have before us this evening?
I think sadly under Robert's rules, we'd have to do them individually.
One by one?
But I think you could accept this by a voice vote rather than a roll call.
Correct.
Okay.
So Representative Goulet made the motion, and we need a second.
Second.
It's been seconded by Representative Henderson, I believe. Okay. So it's been properly moved and seconded, so go right ahead, ma'am. We'll take the voice vote on the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The motion carries. All right. So now, I believe we will now move to vote on State Resolution SR 24-10, establishing.
Mr. Vice President, we still need to vote on the resolution itself.
I apologize. So we will now move to vote on State Resolution SR 24-9, approving the District of Columbia's, which is very important because as our superintendent would like to have done this evening, financial literacy standards. Is there a motion? Is there a motion to move forward?
So moved.
It's been properly it's been properly moved. Is there a second?
We, excuse me, sir, Representative Goulet moved the resolution, and Representative Best seconded it before we
Okay.
did the motion to waive the reading, so we can continue.
Okay, so we can continue. So we
the
do a voice?
Roll call for
A
this.
roll call. Go right ahead.
So this is voting on Resolution SR 24-9, approving the District of Columbia's financial literacy standards. Representative Yarkin.
Aye.
Representative Best.
Aye.
Representative Goulet.
Aye.
Representative Henderson.
Aye.
Representative O'Leary.
Aye.
Representative Williams.
Aye.
Vice President Patterson.
Aye.
SR 24-9, approving the District of Columbia's financial literacy standards, has passed unanimously.
Okay, now I'm hoping I'm staying, since you guys got me a little off by that, off script, as I follow this script. I believe we move on to SR 24-9, is that correct? 10. 10, I apologize, 10. So, establishing committee structures and assignments. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
So this is to approve SR 24-10, establishing committee structures and assignments. Representative Yarkin. Representative Best.
Do we need to move a motion to waive the reading of the resolution?
Oh.
So I'd like to move that motion now, please.
Yes.
See, that's where I got hung up before, so go right
Agreed.
ahead.
We need to do a separate. Thank you, members, for your patience and understanding.
And I move that,
I think that this needs to be read.
if you'd like to. Sure, I withdraw the motion.
The motion has been withdrawn. Madam Deputy Director. So we would like to have it read.
Yes, the motion to waive the reading of SR 24-10 has been withdrawn, so I am going to read it into the record now. State Board of Education Resolution establishing committee structures and assignments, SR 24-10. Whereas the DC State Board of Education is committed to increasing public awareness and understanding of public education issues and policies in the District of Columbia and supporting their improvement, especially for our most vulnerable students. Whereas the public has benefited from the State Board's establishment of committees because their work helps efficiently move the priorities of the State Board forward. And whereas at its March 9 retreat, members of the State Board discussed the current and new work the State Board could pursue in 2024, as well as committees that would oversee such work. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the State Board establishes the following ad hoc committees, committee chairships, and committee members. College, Career, and Life Readiness Committee, Robert Henderson, Ward 5 Chair, Jacques Patterson, District at-Large and Vice President, Alistair Chang, Ward 2, Brandon Best, Ward 6. Student Experience and Engagement Committee, Ben Williams, Ward 1 Chair, Erica Goulet, Ward 3, Fraser O'Leary, Ward 4, Carlene Reed, Ward 8, Joseph Villaflor, Student Representative. Educator Excellence Committee, Fraser O'Leary, Ward 4, Chair, Ben Williams, Ward 1, Robert Henderson, Ward 5. And be it finally resolved that the State Board establishes assignments for the Administrative Committee as follows. Ebony Rose Thompson, Ward 7, President, Jacques Patterson, District at-Large, Vice President and Chair, Alistair Chang, Ward 2, Eric Goulet, Ward 3.
Is there a discussion? All right. Seeing no discussion, the motion is to adopt SR 24-10. Deputy Director, will you call the roll?
Representative Best.
Aye.
Representative Goulet.
Aye.
Representative Henderson.
Aye.
Representative O'Leary.
Aye.
Representative Williams.
Aye.
Representative Patterson.
Aye.
SR 24-10 has passed unanimously.
Okay. Thank you. We will now move to vote to approve the State Board's 2023 annual report. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been properly moved.
Second.
It's been properly seconded. The motion is properly moved and seconded. Is there a discussion on the annual report? Seeing no discussion, the motion is to adopt the State Board's 2023 annual report. Deputy Director, will you call the roll?
Representative Best.
Aye.
Representative Goulet.
Aye.
Representative Henderson.
Aye.
Representative O'Leary.
Aye.
Representative Williams.
Aye.
Vice President Patterson.
Aye.
The 2023 annual report has passed unanimously.
Thank you. Members, are there any announcements or comments you would like to make before we adjourn?
I have two quick announcements. So I sat in yesterday on the Everyday Counts Task Force for chronic absenteeism across the city, and we are currently in the midst of determining a framework for being able to work across agencies to be able to improve absenteeism as a city. Their materials, Darren was also in the meeting with me, so we'll be sending out some materials to update everyone on that. And we have an in-person meeting in April, and then there will be recommendations for the city in June for how to proceed with cross-agency collaboration. And then with regards to the voter registration initiative, that is planning on being announced later today or tomorrow. Right now we have done a lot of work to coordinate that, and it's moving forward smoothly, and I appreciate everyone's work to be able to make that happen so that we can start having students be trained as running voter registration drives at their respective schools.
Thank you very much, Representative Williams. Are there other comments or new business? I'm seeing heads nod. I know people seems to be looking at the door. So with that being said, thank you members for your time and engagement tonight. We will next convene at our working meeting on April 3rd and our public meeting on April 17th. With no further business before this State Board, I would now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It has been moved. Can I get a second?
Second.
I have a second from Representative Henderson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone who wants to stay later? It has been approved. We are now adjourned.